Apple promised us a smarter Siri 2 years ago. They showed it on stage, they demoed it, they made it look incredible, and then it never showed up. Not in iOS 18, not in iOS 18.4 like they said it would be, and not even when they publicly admitted, which almost never happens at Apple, that the feature simply wasn't ready and needed more time. Now we are 2 years later. WWDC is on June 8th, and the leaks coming out of Bloomberg are more detailed than anything we've seen before. And what's being described is genuinely different from what Apple has tried to ship before. Different enough that I think it's actually worth paying attention to this time, even if you've been burned before. In this video, I'm going to walk you through everything that's leaked about the new Siri in iOS 27, including something Apple has never done before that changes the whole picture, and that most people covering this story are kind of glossing over. And I'll be honest with you, this time it does look different. Not because Apple suddenly figured out AI on their own, but because they made some significant decisions behind the scenes that are worth understanding before you watch that keynote. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through everything that's been leaked about the new Siri, what it actually means for how you use your iPhone day to day, and why some of it is more complicated than Apple is probably going to make it sound on stage. Before we get into what's coming, it's worth taking a minute to understand how we got here, because the backstory actually makes the iOS 27 changes more interesting. At WWDC 2024, Apple announced a completely redesigned Siri powered by Apple Intelligence. They showed it understanding context, taking action across apps, reading your screen, and handling complex requests. It looked genuinely impressive, and then almost none of it shipped. Apple quietly pushed the features back, then pushed them back again. And then, in early 2025, they did something almost unheard of for Apple. They publicly announced a delay. Not a vague, "we'll have more to share soon" statement, but an actual acknowledgement that the features weren't ready and wouldn't be coming until 2026. That public admission matters because it tells you something about the scale of the problem Apple was facing internally. Building a large language model that can reliably understand context, take real actions on your device, and compete with ChatGPT and Gemini is genuinely hard. And Apple's on-device approach, which prioritizes privacy by keeping everything local, turned out to be a significant constraint when it came to delivering the kind of conversational AI that people actually want to use. So what did Apple do? They made a deal. According to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, Apple has signed a multi-year agreement with Google to power the new Siri chatbot using a custom version of Google's Gemini AI model. This isn't the same Gemini you use on your Android phone or in the Gemini app. It's a version that's been specifically tuned for Apple. And according to Gurman, it's comparable in capability to Gemini 3, which makes it significantly more powerful than any model Apple has built on its own. There are two things worth understanding about this deal. The first is how the infrastructure works. Apple and Google are reportedly discussing running some of the Siri chatbot queries on Google's servers using Google's tensor processing units, specialized chips built specifically for AI workloads at scale. The reason is straightforward. Apple simply doesn't have the server infrastructure to handle chatbot-style queries across its entire user base. 1 billion people asking Siri complex questions in real time requires a level of compute that Apple hasn't built yet. The second thing is what this means for your privacy. Apple has been very careful to emphasize that your data flows through Apple's private cloud compute system, meaning Apple controls the pipeline even if Gemini is doing some of the thinking underneath. Whether you find that reassuring or not probably depends on how much you trust Apple's privacy architecture. But it's worth knowing that this is no longer a fully on-device experience the way Apple originally described it. And honestly, the fact that Apple had to partner with Google to get this done is the most interesting part of this whole story. This is a company that spent years telling us that privacy and on-device intelligence were the future, and they've now quietly built one of the biggest AI partnerships in the industry to make Siri competitive. That's not a criticism. It's just the reality of where the AI race has gone. Now let's talk about what's changing on your screen, because the interface redesign is actually pretty significant. The glowing orb that currently takes over your entire display when you activate Siri is going away. In iOS 27, Siri is moving into the dynamic island. When you hold the side button or use the wake word, the dynamic island lights up with a pill-shaped animation and shows a prompt that says, "Search or ask." There's a glowing cursor inside it, and a subtle glow around the edge of the island, which is exactly what Apple hinted at in the WWDC 2026 invite artwork, if you caught that. When Siri responds, the answer appears as a transparent card that drops down just below the dynamic island. If you want to go deeper into the conversation, you swipe down on that card, and it opens into a full chat interface that looks a lot like an iMessage thread. A scrollable back-and-forth conversation where you can see everything you've asked and continue from where you left off. This is important because one of the most frustrating things about the current Siri is that it's completely stateless. Ask it something, get an answer, and it's gone. There's no history, no way to continue a thought, no sense that Siri remembers anything about your previous request. The new interface fixes that at a fundamental level. For people who don't have a dynamic island, so anyone on iPhone 13 or older, Apple will likely provide a version of the interface that works on those devices, but it won't have the same visual design. And a lot of the more advanced features will be limited to iPhone 15 Pro and newer due to Apple Intelligence hardware requirements. For the first time in Siri's history, there will be a dedicated Siri app on your iPhone. This has never existed before. Up until now, Siri has lived entirely as a system overlay. You summon it, you get an answer, and it disappears. There's been no way to scroll back through your conversation history, no way to pick up where you left off, no way to use Siri the way you'd use ChatGPT or Claude. The new Siri app changes all of that. Based on internal screenshots that have surfaced from Apple's testing, the app shows a grid of past conversation summaries that you can tap into, a search bar at the top to find old chats, and a plus button in the corner to start a new conversation. You can type or use your voice. You can upload images and documents for Siri to read and summarize. And your conversation history persists across sessions, so you can actually come back to something you were working on earlier. The app is internally codenamed Campos, according to Bloomberg, and it's designed to compete directly with the standalone ChatGPT and Gemini apps that have become part of how a lot of people use AI on their phones. The difference is that Siri will have deep integration with the rest of iOS. Your calendar, your messages, your photos, your health data, in a way that third-party apps can't fully replicate. This is the feature that has the most long-term implications, and it's one that Apple deserves credit for building. In iOS 27, Siri is becoming a front door rather than the whole house. Apple is introducing a Siri extension system that allows third-party AI services, Google Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, and others, to be set as the default brain behind your Siri requests. The way it works is that you download the AI app you prefer from the App Store, go into Settings under Siri and Apple Intelligence, and choose which service handles your requests. Apple is also reportedly building a dedicated AI extension section in the App Store that functions as a marketplace for these integrations, similar to how the Safari extension section works today, but for AI services. What makes this genuinely interesting is that it extends beyond just Siri conversations. According to Gurman, Apple is opening up features like Image Playground and writing tools to third-party AI providers as well. So if you prefer Claude's writing style over Apple's built-in model, you'll be able to use Claude to power the rewrite suggestions you see above your keyboard. And there are even reports that Apple may allow AI services to bring their own voices. So if you use Gemini as your default, you'd hear a Gemini voice rather than the standard Siri voice. This is a significant philosophical shift for Apple. They're essentially admitting that they can't win the AI race alone, and instead of fighting it, they're turning the iPhone into a platform for all AI services to compete on. Whether that's a strength or an admission of weakness probably depends on your perspective. Beyond the interface changes, Siri is getting a set of new capabilities that address the most common complaints people have had for years. Multi-step requests are finally coming. Instead of issuing 3 separate commands to set a timer, text a friend, and play a song, you'll be able to chain them together in a single sentence, and Siri will execute all of them in sequence. This is something competing assistants have been able to do for a while, and it's one of the most practically useful upgrades in this entire update. Screen awareness is also coming, or at least it's supposed to be coming, since Apple promised this at WWDC 2024 and it never shipped. The idea is that Siri can see what's on your display and take action based on it. You open an email and say, "Summarize this and remind me to reply tomorrow." And Siri reads the email, creates a summary, and sets a reminder. You look at a photo and ask Siri to write a caption. You're in Maps and you ask Siri to send your current location to a friend in Messages. All without switching apps or re-explaining context. Web search is also being added in a meaningful way. Instead of giving you a list of links when you ask a question, Siri will read the web and give you an actual synthesized answer with bullet points, summaries, and relevant images, formatted like a proper search result rather than a redirect to Safari. And there's a new swipe down from your home screen and you get a search bar in the dynamic island that works as both a spotlight replacement and a direct prompt for whichever AI you've set as your default. Spotlight as a standalone feature is essentially being absorbed into this new unified search and AI interface. So that's the full picture of what's coming to Siri in iOS 27, based on everything that's leaked ahead of WWDC on June 8th. A new dynamic island interface, a standalone Siri app for the first time ever, Google Gemini powering the engine underneath, third-party AI extensions so you can choose your own assistant, multi-step requests, screen awareness, and web search that actually gives you answers. Now, Apple has promised most of this before and missed the deadline. So the honest answer is that we won't really know how much of it ships, how well it works, or whether it lives up to the description until the beta lands and people actually use it. But on paper, this is the most ambitious Siri redesign Apple has ever attempted, and it's coming at a moment when they genuinely have no choice but to get it right. I'll be covering WWDC live on June 8th with a full breakdown of everything Apple announces. Subscribe so you don't miss it. See you in the next one.